So, the big question is this: how are entrepreneurs and real estate investors like us, ones who want to grow our businesses and who are tired of paying for really expensive alternative lending? How do we tap into the most inexpensive money available and do it without the hassle of typical borrowing? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. I'm Merrill Chandler, and welcome to the Are You Effable podcast. Welcome to the Are You Effable podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how focusing on your personal profile, the goose that lays the golden egg, how focusing on your personal profile and optimizing your personal profile actually has powerful funding results just on the timeline. So we'll be back in a second. And we're back. Okay, all you insider secret folk, we have got an amazing insider secret, but this one's a little bit of math, right? But if you're listening, I'm going to be able to describe it to you every step of the way. If you're watching, you're going to be able to see the actual charts that we're using to determine your fundability when you focus on your personal profile. So let's get started on this. The first thing we want to remember is what David Smith, who is everybody that I met with in my original FICO World 16, right, in 2016, when they referred to the guy who knows SBSS, the Small Business Scoring Service, they always referred us to David Smith. So when we had the opportunity to meet with David Smith, he's the one where blew the doors off of my complete understanding of business underwriting. He said you have to optimize for business credit. You have to optimize your personal profile. So what that dialed down into was that 80% of all business and entrepreneurial small business loans, credit lines, commercial accounts, etc., are qualified. They're approved based on your personal credit profile. So when you have an optimized personal profile, that's what gets approved in your business lending models. So we've gone over a few examples of how they use that. We're going to be going over some more now that we're kind of moving into the business section of things. But the transition of personal to business in these episodes, now this is the cutting line, right? We're going to talk about how optimizing your personal profile actually speeds up your funding timetables. All right, so let's look at this. First thing, and I'm going to recommend you guys need to go to the blog and see these charts for yourself. We want to make sure that you can see. I will outline it. If you're watching the video version of this, guys, it's super easy to understand. All right. First of all, we're going to make some assumptions as we go through this chart. The first assumption is that you start optimizing, whether as a client, as a student, on your own, doesn't matter how you start. We're starting at month 0, right? Day 1, month 1, we're starting at month 0. We're going to presume that your credit limit increases by 30%. We have 100 and 200% increases, and we have 20% increases. Rarely is it just just 10% increase. So we're being conservative, and we're going to say that every 6 months, when you either reapply or automatic limit increases, every 6 months you're going to get at least a 30% increase on your credit line, credit card, or otherwise. Okay. Now we're talking business here because for many of us, we're interested in these entrepreneurial enterprises. Some of us are buying franchises, or we're considering buying franchises. Some of us are real estate investors, note buyers, etc. Right? Does not matter as you begin to understand and learn how to make a business fundable. You're going to see the elegance of this. So the other thing is the initial business line of credit changes based on how long you have been spending optimizing your personal profile. The beginning number, whether you get a 5 or a 10 or a 20 or a 50, whatever that beginning number, that is what increases by 30% every 6 months. So the velocity of credit teaches us, it indicates that the longer we optimize our personal profile, the brand new account that we get when we finally apply is going to be worth more. And of course, the higher it is, the more you can use it, and the more you can write a check and do a deal. All right. So in this first example, we're looking at 0 months. And in 0 months, let's say you have a decent credit score and a decent profile. So let's say you're going to get approved for an initial business line of credit of $5,000. It's small, can't do a lot with it. That's why we encourage you to keep optimizing the personal profile. But every 6 months, it's going to go up 30%. So as we go, so month 6, instead of 5,000, you're at 6,500. Month 12, you're at 8,450, and it continues all the way to month 72. Month 72 is when you cross over the $100,000 mark, right? All business lines of credit that are unsecured, especially stated income, none of them ever go over $100,000. But as we are learning with the $1 Million Funding Formula and the things that we're going to be talking about to establish the right kind of fundable business, $100,000 times 2 or 3 or 5 banks is $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 or more. So 10 banks is where we get the $1 Million Funding Formula. But as I said in a previous episode, the $1 Million Funding Formula, we use that because FICO's small business scoring service software is designed to approve unsecured up to $1 million in business lines of credit. It's designed, the entire thing is designed to get you to that $1 million. So that's why we use that. It also helps that when we go to events, we have these awesome little $1 million bills that we hand out as placeholders to remind you to keep moving towards your highest possible goal. All right. So there's a lot of reasons, but we're using $100,000. But you need to remember that instead of just calling it 100, if you've done this with 2 or 3 accounts, you're sitting at 72 months, that's 6 years, you're sitting on $100,000, $300,000, depending on how many banks that you have vetted, established the business relationships with, and are doing and running the $1 Million Funding Formula through. All right. Now, that's what happens when you start out at 0. It takes 6 years to get there. 6 years to get to that $100,000 or corresponding amount, depending on the number of banks you've established these relationships with. Next, let's say you work on your credit profile for 6 months, your personal credit profile. You work on your personal credit profile and you establish higher limits, lower balances, your 24-month look-back period you're deliberately using, so you trigger higher funding rates. All right. So here we're going to say, let's pretend you work for 6 months, and instead of getting $5,000 at 0 months, at 6 months, you get a $10,000 credit limit. Now, remember, again, always remember, I'm only putting these in here, but if you're using 2 or 3 banks or 4 or 5, however many you're implementing the funding formula with, you're going to be getting the corresponding. So that could be, instead of 10,000 at 3 banks, that's $30,000. But notice what happens. We're already through month 6, so the 30% on top of 10,000 would be 13,000. Month 18 is 16,900. 24 months is 21,970, and all the way up to month 60 is when you get that $100,000, or with, in this case, 3 accounts, you would have $300,000. You just shaved off an entire year for optimizing for only 6 months. Am I making sense? You spent 6 months optimizing, got a higher limit, and you shaved off a full year to get that $100,000 for 1 account, $300,000 for 3 accounts. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's say we're going to optimize for a full year. Optimize, no business accounts, no filing for business lines of credit, no commercial loans. You're taking my word for it that the velocity of credit is a thing. You believe in you want to make your goose that lays golden eggs as healthy as possible. I'm throwing in all the metaphors, guys. You want to turn on the funding machine. So you spend 12 months on personal profile. 12 months on your personal profile. optimizing all of the funding metrics, right? The FICO 40, etc. So let's say you get a $20,000 a business line of credit, or 3 of them if you're working 3 banks, or more if you're working more. So we don't even start until month 18, and then 20 becomes 26, 33, etc. You just shaved off another 6 months off of your time to get that 100,000, 300,000 in the case of having 3 business banking relationships. All right. So you just shaved off another. Now, the fun one here is that at 18 months, now this is typical. I'm giving you real live numbers. 0 months, 5,000 is typical. You could get a 10, but depending on the quality of your profile. But after 6 months, you're going to get a 10 to a 20. At 12 months, you're going to get a 20 to a 40. So I'm saying at 18 months, we're playing conservative. You get you've spent 18 months on your personal profile, and you're going to, so that means we go all the way out to 52,000 on month 24, 67.6 at month 30, 36 months is 87.80. You're at 100 grand in month 42. That's 3.5 years. 6 years at waiting 0 months, 3.5 years if you spent 18 months on your personal profile. Now, I told you back earlier, we discussed who we affectionately call Teresa P. And Teresa actually optimized for 14 months before she even filed an application. And if you recall her testimonial, the recording of her testimonial, they asked her for full documentation, pulled her profile, looked at all the metrics, ran it through their software, and then didn't finish asking. They gave her a $500,000 business line of credit, unsecured, and it was stated income because the docs she was willing to give them, they didn't ask for. To this date, they haven't asked for them. And if you remember her testimonial, she took down $1 million asset using that credit line, which is changing everything for her retirement, her goals, etc. 18 months and a $40,000 line of credit out of the gate. Now remember, that's if you have 2 or 3 banking relationships that you're implementing the funding formula on, you're going to be able to, that's $120,000. How many of you, is that a game changer for buying a franchise, for investing in real estate, buying notes, augmenting your inventory for your Amazon account? How much does $120,000 get you? If you are patient, if you are not even patient, if you are deliberate, if you're a credit eagle, like we discussed in the last episode, if you're strategic in every way and you spend the necessary time, though we spent all 25 of the previous episodes, guys, all 25 of those were based on the fundamentals of building your fundability on your personal profile, because that is what lenders use to measure your how you treat other people's money. If we spent 18 months, I'm not saying you have to. I'm saying that there is a mathematical relationship between the time you spend on your personal profile perfecting it and the time you get to that $100,000 per line. In this case, 42 months is 300 grand. Okay? Now, I want us to understand the impact of this. I want us to understand what this really means when it comes to your fundability. First and foremost, we do this with the $1 million funding formula is designed to implement with any version, any number of business banking relationships. But those business bankers are going to look at your personal profile. And so somebody said, well, still 42 months, that's 3.5 years to get my $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. All right. First of all, what are you doing right now without it? You haven't known the rules of the game. You haven't known how to play this game, much less master it. And so we don't want to be greedy. So here's what I would propose. What if you read my book, finished watching all zillion thousand of these episodes? What if you went to the boot camp? What if you became a coach? Whatever way in which you want to relate with me and this technology. What if your worst case scenario is you did everything you needed to do, and what if you picked up $200,000 every year? Let's say it took you 24 months, 12 months to get that, $100,000. So remember, 40 grand, 18 months, we're sitting at $120,000. What if every year you picked up another $200,000 because all of these continue to age? 10 banks, and let's say 2 banks added every single year to the tune of $200,000. Would it be okay if you had $1 million over the next 5 years? Could you add, you know how fast a year goes by, could you add successfully only 200 grand every year until you hit your $1 million in 5 years? Would that be okay? Would that be a game changer for you? Would that make a difference in how you're growing your business, how you're capitalizing your growth? Would it help you add more franchises, or open up more stores? Would it allow you to do more deals? Could you take down more properties? The question is if we're not greedy and you slow-boated this thing, would it be okay if you, over the next 5 years, you receive $200,000, new $1,000 every month or every year? Guys, I'm telling you, I've had clients come to me over and over. They come in the very beginning. They're like, I want my $1 million. I can slay the whole world with $1 million in lines of credit. I'm like, awesome. Here's how you do it. Here's the $1 million funding formula. Everything your guys are gonna learn how to do it, right? What are the principles behind the $1 million funding formula and what needs to be done? And invariably, I only have probably, I have less than 20 individuals who have hit the $1 million mark. You're like, whoa, those must be disappointing results, Merrill. I'm like, no. So let me tell you, Brad may have shared this story in one of our previous episodes, but a gentleman came to us. His name was Noah, and he was hell-bent on the $1 million funding formula. Just hell-bent. He goes, I'm all in. This is awesome. And he does everything. I think he works, it was 8 months was all he needed to get his personal profile in order. First day he goes out, and he actually, in the same day, got approved for two $50,000, one from each of 2 different banks that he had built the relationships with. Followed the process to the nth degree. Got $100,000. We never heard from him again. I used this story, but we sent emails, follow-ups, this, that, and the other, and he sent us a testimonial, of which you may have already seen in one of the episodes, or whether you did watch the boot camp or whatever. But the thing is, his 100 grand was enough to leverage him to be able to pick up the properties for his fix and flips to do what he needed to do. He didn't need more money. And to this day, after we got the testimonial, haven't heard a thing from him. Happy client, but haven't heard a thing. Over and over and over, people say, yeah, I want that $1 million. Absolutely. And then they hit 200,000 or 300,000 and they're like, thank you very much. This is awesome. I'm out. Because since we don't have access to that, for some people who are using hard money, instead of, let's say, picking up a $100,000 home and they need $30,000 to have their skin in the game, they're playing. Of course, you're paying points and higher interest. But if you had 100,000, you're literally able to do 3 deals at a time using hard money. just $100,000. So if you have $200,000 or $300,000, how many deals can you take down? How many franchises can you open at a time? How many branches? How many dry cleaners? How many gyms? We had one client who was just opened up more and more gyms, but the money to establish the new place and fund the purchase of his weights and inventory fell under the $300,000 he had on his credit lines before he could start cash flowing. So I challenge you, go for the million. Take my number over 20. But so many clients don't need the money they think they need when they actually have it in their hot little hand, and those automatic limit increases continue to grow, and you're taking down the properties that you want to take. You're growing, expanding your dry cleaners. You're buying notes. You're buying new franchises. We have home investors. We buy ugly houses. The caveman. We love that whole crew. We're their Fundability team for the entire franchise outfit. People buy these franchises and kill it in real estate, and they have the money to do so. So guys, whatever your goals, if you're in the personal realm and you're just listening to this so that you have the very best credit possible, so that you have the opportunity, keep binging these episodes, because I'm going to show you how to set up a funding entity that's a legitimate business that's focused and circled around you, not something that you're not doing yet. You can be a W-2 for the next 20 years, but I can show you how to set up a funding entity that will be able to fund any enterprise, any experiment, any business opportunity that you want to do in the future. And I'm going to show you in these episodes that are coming, the next 10 episodes, I'm going to show you how to establish this focused around you and not the deals that you're doing, not your podiatrist business that you're opening up additional clinics. I'm just going to show you how to take this profile. We've been working so hard to learn the rules to the game. I'm going to show you how to create a funding entity that will just be masterful, that you can then invest in anything you wish over time. So take the time to invest in your fundability. Take the time to focus on your personal profile, to make that golden goose healthy, to grease all the gears of your funding machine. Because when you do it, guys, you will optimize your personal profile and you will have more funding and faster funding. Everything that your business dreams, your entrepreneurial dreams can come true when you spend the time and the energy on optimizing your personal profile. This is Merrill Chandler with Are You Effable? And you have a spectacular day. Hey guys, thank you for listening to Are You Effable? Please leave comments because I would love to read about your aha moments from this episode. And be sure to visit fundinghackers.com to view the blog post, get important links, join our community, and much, much more. And you gotta tell your friends about this podcast. We want them to become effable too.